Hey everyone, welcome back to Everything Poultry. We're back with another deep dive, and you know what that means. More practical tips and advice on raising happy and healthy birds.
That's right. We're here to guide you every step of the way. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, you're in the right place.
Absolutely. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
We really appreciate the support.
So today we're tackling a topic that's crucial for any poultry enthusiast brooding chicks. Those first few weeks are make or break, so we're diving deep into what it takes to give those fluffy little dinosaurs the best possible start.
It's amazing how much goes on in those first few weeks. We're talking about a period of rapid development. These tiny creatures are totally dependent on us to get it right.
It's a lot of responsibility,
Yeah.
but so rewarding when you see them thriving. We've been poring over some seriously in-depth brooding manuals, and one thing that keeps popping up is this idea of mimicking a mother hen's care.
It makes total sense when you think about it. For centuries, chicks have evolved to thrive in that specific environment.
Right, the warmth, the protection, having food and water always available.
Exactly. Our job is to recreate that as closely as possible, even if we're dealing with 100 chicks instead of a dozen.
It's like building a five-star chick hotel. And just like any good hotel, it all starts with the right temperature, am I right?
Absolutely. Temperature control is critical in those first few weeks, especially since chicks can't actually regulate their own body temperature until they get a little older. It's like they're walking, talking thermometers.
They really are. I remember reading that they need a brooder temperature of 90 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit for that first week alone.
That's right. And then we gradually decrease it as they start to develop their own internal thermostats.
Kind of like slowly introducing them to the real world, but in a controlled, chick-friendly way.
Exactly. And it's not just about cranking up the heat. We need to consider drafts, too.
Yeah, you don't want to create a wind tunnel in there. It's all about finding that perfect balance.
A cozy environment, but with proper ventilation so it doesn't get stuffy. That fresh air is important, but we need to make sure it's not a direct blast on those little chicks, especially when they're so young.
It's all about that Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right.
Exactly.
So we've got the temperature down. But what about hydration? We all know how important it is to stay hydrated, especially after a workout. And let's be honest, those chicks are constantly running around like they're late for something.
You're right. Chicks are little bundles of energy, and all that activity means they need constant access to fresh, clean water.
Makes sense. But I've always wondered, why are those chick waterers so shallow? Is it to prevent accidental drowning? Because honestly, that's a thought that keeps me up at night.
You know, it might sound funny, but it's a real concern. Those little guys can drown in surprisingly shallow water, especially when they're still figuring out this whole being a chick thing.
They're still learning the ropes. Speaking of learning the ropes, if you're new here and enjoying this deep dive into the world of chick care, don't forget to show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel.
We love seeing new faces and hearing what you think, so don't be shy about leaving a comment below.
The more the merrier. But back to those thirsty chicks, one thing I've always been curious about is this idea of adding sugar to their water. Is that a real thing or just an old wives' tale?
It's a real thing. It's actually a great way to give them a quick energy boost, especially on that first day when they're still recovering from hatching and getting adjusted to their new surroundings.
It's like their version of a Red Bull, but without the wings.
Exactly. It helps them rehydrate, kickstarts their metabolism, and gets them going.
Speaking of getting going, let's talk about another important element, food. What should we be feeding these little guys to ensure they grow big and strong?
Ah, yes, the fuel that powers these adorable, fluffy growth machines. And believe me, it's not as simple as tossing them some birdseed. We're talking about a very specific diet here, tailored to meet their unique nutritional needs.
So what's the magic formula? What should we be looking for in a good chick starter feed?
Well, for starters, we need to make sure it's packed with protein. We're talking 18–20%. It might seem like a lot, but they're growing at an incredible rate, so they need that extra fuel.
It's like their version of a protein shake, but without the gym membership fees. But it's not all about protein, is it? What else is hiding in this magic chick starter feed?
It's a whole symphony of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, you name it, all carefully balanced to support their development. Everything from bone growth to feather production.
It's like a nutritional powerhouse, specifically designed for those crucial early weeks.
Precisely. And here's a fascinating tidbit for the first few days. Instead of using a feeder, it's actually recommended to scatter the feed on a flat surface.
Really? Why is that? You'd think a feeder would be easier, less messy.
You'd think so, right? But chicks are instinctively programmed to peck for their food.
Ah, like they're hardwired for a good old-fashioned treasure hunt.
Exactly. Scattering the feed encourages that natural foraging behavior. It helps them develop a strong feeding response.
Fascinating. So we've covered food, water, temperature.
Mm,
What about lighting? I know they need plenty of light in the beginning, but does that change as they grow?
it does. Remember how we talked about mimicking a natural day-night cycle?
Right, like creating a mini sun for our feathered friends?
Exactly. As we hit week 2, we want to start gradually reducing their light exposure, especially for the layer chicks.
So no more 2047 chick parties.
Not quite. While broilers, the chicks raised for meat, they benefit from longer light exposure. Layer chicks, on the other hand, need a bit more balance. Reducing their exposure to around 18 hours a day helps regulate their sleep patterns and get them ready for life outside the brooder.
Makes sense. You don't want them staying up all night partying when it's time to lay those eggs. Which reminds me, when do we start to see differences between layers and broilers in terms of their feed?
That's a great question. They both start on the same high-protein starter feed, but broilers might transition to a grower feed as early as week 2.
So they level up faster.
They do. All those extra calories go towards building muscle and supporting those impressive growth rates.
It's like switching from baby food to, well, teenager food, right? Always hungry.
Exactly. But for our future laying ladies, it's a slower, more gradual process. We keep them on the starter feed a little longer. We don't want to overload them with protein too early. It can actually be harmful to their health and their egg production down the line.
Wow. It's amazing how we can tailor their diet based on their future careers.
It really is.
Speaking of future careers, it's not just their feed that changes as they grow, right? They're getting bigger, more active. I imagine they're going to need a bit more space in that brooder.
Absolutely. Remember how we talked about providing at least 1 square foot of space per chick? Well, as they head into week 2 and beyond, we need to increase that.
Give them some breathing room.
Exactly. Overcrowding is a recipe for disaster. It stresses them out, which is never a good thing.
And we all know what happens when chickens get stressed. It's not pretty. So what are some of the telltale signs of overcrowding? More importantly, how can we avoid it?
One of the first things you'll notice is increased competition. Are they constantly jostling for position at the feeders and waterers? Is there a lot of pushing and shoving, maybe even some pecking?
Now, pecking order, that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it?
Yeah.
And speaking of cans of worms, if you're finding this deep dive insightful, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Everything Poultry for more poultry raising tips and tricks. We've got you covered.
We do. But to answer your question about pecking order, it is a naturally occurring hierarchy that develops within flocks.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing. I always pictured it as kind of well, a fettered version of Lord of the Flies.
It can be, especially in overcrowded conditions. When chicks are stressed and competing for limited resources, that pecking order can escalate. We're talking bullying, even injuries. It can get ugly.
So space management is crucial. But how much space is enough space? How do we create a brooder environment that promotes a healthy pecking order where everyone gets along? So we've talked about the importance of space, but how much space are we talking about exactly? Is there a magic number?
Well, there isn't one magic number that fits all situations, but a good rule of thumb is to increase the space as they grow. By week 3, you'll want to aim for at least 2 square feet per bird.
2 square feet, got it. So it's like upgrading them from a cozy studio apartment to a spacious condo. Everyone deserves a little room to breathe.
Exactly. And it's not just about preventing fights, it's about giving them enough space to engage in their natural behaviors, like flapping their wings, exploring their surroundings.
Right, they need to be able to stretch those wings and practice those chicken struts. What about their diet at this stage? Are we still on the starter feed versus grower feed debate?
Great question. By week 3, those broiler chicks are well on their way to,
Becoming chicken nuggets.
Exactly. They'll be happily munching on that protein-rich grower feed. But for our layer ladies, it's still a waiting game. They typically transition to a grower feed with slightly lower protein content around week 6.
It's incredible how their diet is so specifically tailored to their ultimate purpose, whether it's laying eggs or, well, becoming dinner.
It really is a fascinating process.
It really is. And speaking of fascinating, we've covered a lot of ground today. Temperature, hydration, feed, even the pecking order. If you had to pick just one takeaway for our viewers who are new to this whole chick brooding thing, what would it be?
That's a tough one. But I think the most important thing is learning to observe your chicks.
Become a chick whisperer.
Exactly. They're constantly communicating with us through their behavior. Are they huddled together, spread out? Are they eating and drinking consistently? These little cues can tell you a lot about how they're feeling, if they're thriving.
It's like learning a whole new language, the language of chicks.
Precisely. And the more fluent you become in that language, the better equipped you'll be to provide them with the care they need to thrive.
Absolutely. Well said. It's been an incredible deep dive into the world of chick brooding. And if you're ready to embark on this adventure yourself, or simply want to learn more about raising happy, healthy chickens, be sure to subscribe to Everything Poultry.
We release a new video every week packed with practical advice and, of course, plenty of adorable chicken footage.
Because who doesn't love adorable chicken footage? And while you're at it, give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. Until next time, happy chick raising, everyone.